All right, guys, I think we are ready to get into mixing. And before we really move past, for the most part, production and arrangement, I just wanted to throw something out there. If you've stuck with me this far, congratulations. Because whether you realize it or not, you can see it. You can see the project developing. You can see that things are happening here. Because all I really mean by that is when I listen to this track, it's minimal. It needs work to sound not so, there's a couple things you could call it dated, just kind of plain. But the problem is really that's true for anything. If you go back and listen to Big Room, House, or EDM from 2012, it's going to sound dated. If you listen to even some genres from last year or 6 months ago, they can sound dated. So music is really tricky, and it has a very mean way of exposing or placing judgment on things. So I say all of that because what sounded good last year and was all the rage, well, people kind of judge it and are like, well, that's so last year now. Yeah, but at the end of the day, all of these things are just sounds. All of these things are just presets, and all of these things are just techniques and trends to get the sound that you're looking for, and eventually, just like the ebb and flow, it'll have its time, and its time meaning it might go completely commercial, or it just might kind of rise up in popularity in the underground, and then it will calm down, and things kind of tend to ebb and flow like that. So all I really mean when I preface what I'm about to say with that is that, like, you can change the kick, okay? If you don't like the bass line, well, there's two things in major terms, broad strokes, that you can change. You can change the pattern, do-do-do, 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 do-do-do. You could change that. You can also change the sound. You have to kind of decide what isn't working. Is it the pattern, or is it the sound? Is it both? And obviously keep notes. You don't want to change the sound without remembering what you last had on there as at least a decent sound. So just understand that this is a template. This isn't a be-all, end-all, answer-all. This is just to get you out of your rut of looping and having an 8-bar loop and nothing to really release or show anybody other than an 8-bar loop that just keeps going around and around. So with all that said, take this minute, and before we jump into mixing, we can either decide that we're cool with what we have, let's just mix it and master it and be done and let it be what it is and have a track completed, whether we release it or not. It's the idea of completing it so that we can show anybody, whether it be our moms or a potential client or record label or something, that we have something and that we are capable, most importantly, capable of completing a project. Or say to yourself, well, I feel good with it, and this could be a trap, so be careful here, but I feel good with it. I'm going to change out some of the sounds right now and take a minute to dive a little bit deeper into production, get maybe a cooler sounding bass line or a different pattern or something more relevant to what I want to create, but kind of use what you've set up so far as a template, as my sketch pad. If it were me, I would be very careful, because that's a very slippery slope of changing out sounds and changing patterns, because you're not far from basically finding yourself an hour in of doing that into no man's land, where you feel lost, you don't know what you did, you're really screwed up, and now you just feel like life is not good. So with that said, I would be careful doing that. We'll move into mixing now. I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. I almost hated to say anything and throw it out there, but I want to give you guys options, and the power that I give you in those options, I just trust that you can stop and think if it's a wise decision or not. And if it's not, you at least have this project saved as is, and you can always come back to it. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move into mixing. Probably what I'll do is put this right on the drop, into the drop, only because we don't want the swoosh, the swooshes, as I call them, the risers and the cymbals, always crashing as we loop this. So if you want to kind of alleviate that, you go more towards the middle. Now every time that loop completes, we don't have a crash cymbal killing us right there. Because this is a 30-day, we're not going to go overboard on this. We're just going to do some basic mixing to get it sounding good, and move on with it. Because the idea isn't to create a timeless masterpiece in 30 days. The idea is to get something done so that we can prove to ourselves that making a track isn't this unattainable thing. You can complete a track and just switch out the sounds later so that it's more of a current sound, if you like. So kick drum. I don't really think there's too much that we're gonna do to it. Probably what we'll do with everything is put an EQ and a compressor on just about everything, to be honest. We'll probably do EQ, we'll do compressor, and you'll see why. Don't panic, just hang on. Saturator. And I'm just trying to think where, I guess we'll put it like that, that's fine. Shift click, copy, and probably what we'll do just to make it easy is we will just go down the line, paste, paste. Can you believe he's doing this? Yeah, relax. Paste. I forgot that there's a bunch of stuff in here, so we might remove that bus paste that I just did, but this is just a quick, easy way of... See, because you have to understand what I'm doing is I'm setting this up for future templates as well. I understand that we may not need 2 compressors and or saturation on everything, but at least this way, when you get into month 2, because this is only month 1, you're going to move on from this and use this template again and again and again and again. Now you have compressors and EQs on every single channel, and that's at least good enough to get you a decent mix. So I may have forgot to do the mini break as well, but that's okay. We can come back to that. We're confident enough right now that we can put something in there and it'll be fine. So with the kick, let's run up here. Probably what I would do, oops, I'm doing that just to control the low end. I might even cheat that a little more and bump it up to 35. But yeah, I mean, with what I'm hearing here, I just don't think you need to overproduce it too much. Generally speaking, you could boost the lows a little bit if you wanted to. You could boost the highs a little or find like the knock if you wanted to, and you could kind of do a dip somewhere around maybe 2 or 350 roughly. General guideline right there. You could even not boost the hot lows, but you have it if you need it. So maybe kind of sort of something like that. I'm sure the purists are having a heart attack watching what I'm doing here, but I mean, you can hear it. It changed it, but it didn't, completely alter the character to the point where I broke the rules. Once again, guidelines, guys. If you want the low end to be brought out, which we'll talk about that, because you don't want to bring out the low end too much, especially without, like right now I'm sitting in a camper. And I mean, with these headphones are as old as time, so I really know them well, but I'll show you ways to look at your low end and decide if you really need to boost it. I would be careful about boosting too much. And then same with the top end. You don't need the kick to, especially with the kind of kick and the kind of track this is, it doesn't need to cut through the mix super hard with like a notch boost somewhere in the high end, because we really don't have a lot of tracks. There's not a lot of stuff that's clashing here. What you could do too, if you really wanted to, is, sorry, I'm getting text messages, is you could basically set your compressor. I'm trying to think. We could cut off just do a little something like that, maybe. Just cutting the peaks, and then what you can do is a much slower attack, just to kind of dig into the sound and do more of an overall taming of the sound. So this one's going to catch the peaks of the sound. This one's going to dig in more and really control more of the overall volume of the kick. May not be appropriate in this track, but as you change out kicks, you'll see how having one compressor to control the peaks is good, and then having another compressor to control kind of the general more subtle dynamics and really dig into the sound can be nice as well. It really just depends on what you need. So this I'd probably even you can hear that it was giving a volume boost already, and you don't necessarily want to use it if you don't need to boost volume. You're looking to, if you have something that's really cutting through and you need to control those peaks, it's a good idea to use saturation as well as sort of a fast attack and fast release to basically cut off those peaks to get a proper master. This compressor will turn on. Little compression, that's fine. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people who are purists are probably having a heart attack with this, but it's just really not necessary to have a heart attack with it. As I respond to this text, I'm going to explain saturation. Saturation is another way of cutting off peaks so that you can get a better master. A lot of times what happens with saturation is it gets ignored, and actually saturation really shouldn't be something to only think of as a way to add distortion. It's a very nice way to tame peaks, which will end up getting you that nice loud master that you seek. So adding a little boost of saturation is really, I think it's quite nice and good. And let me just see. I'm thinking probably the analog clip will be fine. All I did is take away what I added. So I added 5D here, 5 dB here. You can equal it out and take away there. That way your brain doesn't play too much of a trick on you, because anything that sounds louder is going to sound better. Anything that sounds louder is going to sound better. So you want to kind of equal the volume of what used to be your kick and what now is your kick as a result of what you added, in this case saturation. So that should control any peaks, but I really don't think we have any because this is a basic 909 kick. For right now, broad strokes, that should do it. I know that sounds ridiculous, but until we compare it to everything else in the track by playing everything else with it in the track, that's pretty much what you do. You really can't mix a track by soloing each individual layer and expecting to unsolo it and have it fit in perfectly. You need to listen to it in relation to other things in the track. So as we move on to claps here, we're definitely going to curve off all low end, because we really don't need a lot of low end for a clap. I would go as far as about 150, 200. I also like to curve off just a little bit on the top end too. I know a lot of people don't do that, but I do, just to kind of help us with getting a competitive volume in the master, but also because this is dance music. This is more than likely going to be played on a very loud sound system at a party, and the last thing you want is really high highs that are just shrieking and killing people's ears. So let's do a little surgical work to this. If If you wanted to get a little bite out of this, once again, I would kind of do just a rinse and repeat of what we did before. And then probably what we can do here is, once again, kind of like a slow attack, slow release, something like that-ish. Alright, cool. A little saturation on there. I add saturation a little bit to everything, just so it can really tame those peaks. Of course, this is kind of a quick and dirty session, so what you'd probably want to do is once you're able to make a track in a month, you can really start to then move on to actually producing full-on productions where you're really managing a full session. I know that sounds a little bit kind of ridiculous or counterintuitive, but it's much better to just be able to complete a track, produce the entire thing, arrange the entire thing, mix the entire thing, and master the entire thing. And then month after month after month of doing that, you'll get better, rather than you've never produced a whole track, never even done a basic mix down on a whole track, but gosh darn it, you've got a killer 8-bar loop that you've been working on for a year and a half. And I know I'm beating a dead horse by saying that, but it's, you know, it's really worth holding close to you in your years, as the years go on with your production, because the other way I just really find doesn't benefit people. Not doing anything too extreme anywhere. It's not that you can't, but I've come to find that mixing is kind of a delicate balance. Even when you're doing a quick and dirty job like this, it really is. It's a delicate balance, and I wouldn't really make any one plugin work too hard. So you can even see here, there's some low-end information, and that's absolutely unnecessary for hi-hats. So we're going to take that away. So what you can see I'm doing here is actually getting into a flow state. I'm just listening, and once again, this isn't some masterpiece. So I'm adding a little high end to the clap, and I'm taking the compressor that is basically for catching the peaks, which we can even name this peak compressor, and this is more of a, I call it any number of things. Peak compressor versus general compressor. Our saturator, okay, that's down, and I'll probably do the same thing with this kick. And keep in mind, guys, this is just to kind of get you started so you have somewhere to go next month. You know, I wouldn't really recommend starting from scratch every time. If you're looking to really bust out tracks and either eventually produce a lot of tracks yourself, become a ghost producer, co-producer, something like that. Okay, the reverb group. If I'm not mistaken with the reverb group, we got a lot of the low end out there. Although this reverb group is basically a catch-all for all the instruments, even the bass line, it's not really too necessary for a lot of information to be below 30 Hertz. So it's okay to curve that off. I'll probably curve off the top end too. There's not a lot going on down there anyways. And once again, for dance music, in general, you want to be careful of the highs that are coming through. You don't have to go overboard with it, and really, just generally speaking, if you're using generally good samples and generally good sounds, a little bit of curve off, you don't even necessarily have to, but I just like to do that. That way there's nothing way high up in maybe the 12 to 15 to 20 kilohertz range that's just piercing, and at 100 decibels in a nightclub is just making it very unpleasant to listen to. Now we'll dig into all the instruments, and we're going to really talk about the bass relationship with the kick in a moment. Shut that bass off for a minute because I can see that we're peaking out on the master here, and you really don't want your master ever to be in red. Right now it's kind of a gray area because I'm trying to get stuff going, but probably what I'll do is just take this down by 2 decibels just so it's not in the red. That's fine for now, and then what we're actually going to do is balance all of these instruments in relation to each other. It's just right now we're just trying to get a basic thing going here. Okay, yeah, we're going to look at the bass and the kick in just a moment. Let's just get a general, shape going. It's almost like someone who wants a haircut that has like long hair, and they want to go short but not a buzz cut. You're not just going to dive right in and surgically do it. You're kind of taking a couple inches off at a time just to get it to a manageable, workable level. see here with that woo, there's a little bit of a hump or a hill right there on that vocal. We cannot have that if we expect to get a halfway decent master, at least in dance music. So watch again right here. So that's why when I turn this on, you no longer see it. It took care of that. And I'm going to go pretty high up on this because it's a vocal. It really has no business in the low range, especially it's a female vocal. She's not a baritone, so it's just not necessary for her to even be in that range. This is where really compression like this, 2 compressors really work well, simply because 1 compressor to catch the peaks, that's great. Another compressor just for general squeezing, leveling, to keep it consistent throughout the track is good as well. Not that this is a singing vocal track, but vocals are really where, 2, 3 compressors can sometimes be nice, but usually at least 2, because you're using 2 different compressors because they're doing 2 different things that 1 compressor alone really can't do. 1 is just absolutely slammed with a fast attack, slammed ratio, fast attack to catch peaks. Those peaks are going to mess up your mix. They're going to mess up the listener's experience. They're going to, and at the very least, even if people don't notice it, it'll mess up your master, your ability to master well. So compressor to catch the peaks, compressor for kind of general leveling. Off to the races we go. And we'll get a little saturation on there. And understand that saturation kind of is sort of a nod to like the old school days when you were using different mics, different mic preamps, different boards, different gear altogether, not just a laptop, the way that we do now. And that saturation really helped kind of tame peaks and spikes in the signal. So a lot of people, like I said, ignore that, but it's actually something that's sort of something that's needed. All right. These guys, I think, are only in the... Pardon me. These guys, I think, are only in the breakdown. So we're going to need to switch over to the breakdown so we can actually hear them. Whoops. Nothing like making it disappear. The reason why I'm curving off the low end in this is because in the breakdown, the whole point of the breakdown is to take the energy sort of away from the track. The weight of the track needs to go away. So taking the low end away will help kind of ease up on the rumble and the low end information, obviously. Something like this might be good to have peak compression on as well, simply because there's probably going to be, it looks pretty dynamic. Yeah, and there you go. There's the proof right there. Okay, and now little things like these crashes and uprisers, these aren't a real big deal, but you do need to pay attention to them simply because usually with the risers, well, and the cymbals as well, there's low-end information. And that low-end information, once again, can mess up your master. So let's listen to our crash. You could see it right there in the crash. So let's go ahead, curb that off, kaboom. May not be a bad idea to get some peak on here. Since it is a cymbal, it can wreak a little bit of havoc sometimes. And especially too if it's hitting at the same time as everything else, that can cause some problems as well. So what we'll probably do with that is go in, and this looks like it might be an arrangement thing, but it's really kind of a it's kind of a blur between mixing and arrangement. When you have a drop and there's everything hitting at the same time as everything comes in, you have a crash hitting, you have possibly vocals, possibly a bass line, steel drums, but really a crash and a kick. There's a lot of peak information, spikes in the audio that are hitting at the same time. It's a good idea to give them all just a few milliseconds of room so everybody has a chance to kind of shine and speak their voice without overwhelming and having a huge peak right here with the cymbal and the kick. Let the kick hit, the peak will be right here. Let the crash hit, the peak will be roughly around there, and now there's room in the audio. People don't understand sometimes when they're mastering, why is it that when the drop comes in, does my mastering just go to crap? The limiting sounds terrible, the compression, everything sounds off. You have to watch your peaks. This quick mixing tutorial for the 30-day power production course really is sort of a turning into a peak lesson about mastering and how to avoid the frustrations of that. Okay, so that's just a sample, so that's why we don't have an instrument on this track. Whoops. Okay, all right. And I mean, I understand a lot of people are going to say, like, man, how can you just... I have a problem with the way that you're mixing this down. How can you just zip through it? You know, my counter to that would be, especially if you're at a certain level in production, like, when do you want to get a track done? You know, I mean, there's nothing wrong with really focusing on mixing well and producing well and arranging well. And there's nothing that says that this isn't like that as well. It's all opinion. But zeroing in on detail is great when you have a foundation to stand on. I think the biggest mistake I made in audio production was I was trying to get great on the little things like EQing a kick or a bass separation of the kick and the bass line, but I had never even completed a darn track. Like, it's so backwards to worry about the details. Like, you know, don't worry about the finishing work on a house before you've even built the walls. Get the foundation up, get the walls up, you know, get some insulation and some drywall in there, and then let's worry about finishing off the doorway with trim. You know, get the doorway first. So that's kind of the idea here. I understand that to some people who are going to watch this is very quick and dirty, but it's really just a matter of taste and trend. There's a lot of underproduced house music and techno out there, and you know, a lot of big guys make it and travel and make a full-time living, a great full-time living with those techniques, whereas there's plenty of people, we all know them, some of us even are them, people who have to work, you know, a full-time job in something that has nothing to do with music at all, and yet we go home and we obsess over getting the latest EQ so that we can EQ our kick and our bass better, or whatever it may be, vocals, claps, whatever, yet we can never even finish a track. So just be careful about how you judge things and how you're looking at things. It can be tricky. Okay, let's just make sure we're still running here. We are, that's great. Okay, so that's good. Let's go to Rise Up. And it's really a lot of the same. Kill the highs. I'm sorry, kill the lows. High pass filter. Roughly around there. Ratio. Attack. Release. Okay. This one. And what you're seeing here, I think I've already said this, but this is all just general maintenance, general things that you'll have ready should you need them. But like, there's really very little compromise when it comes to like cleaning out the low end. Like, you could get into a long discussion about it, but I mean, the long and the short of it is really more or less the only thing that should be in your low end is your kick and your bass line. There's really no reason why a white noise riser should have space in the low end. So just clean it out, carve it out, put a high pass filter on it like you see right here. High pass filter, otherwise, known as killing your low end, just scooping out the low end so it's no longer there. And 3 dB of saturation really shouldn't make that big of a difference to the ear, but it makes a huge difference when it comes to mastering. And we might even go a little bit more extreme on that. Okay, so now that we generally have things set up, I know a lot of times people will start with leveling things, but being that this is more or less going to be our template, it's just a good idea because it's going to change over time. Have EQs, have compressors, and have saturation set up and ready. Then we get into, balancing the levels, seeing what we need to do and all of that. Could you balance the levels first and then add this stuff as needed? You could, but this is just the way I do it, and this is the way to get it done quickly and actually complete tracks. So if your interest is in completing a track, just follow this, and it'll help. It will. You can obsess later on. Join me in the next video, guys, and we will do